You are listening to the IoT for All Media Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the IoT for All podcast on the IoT for All Media Network. I'm your host, Ryan Chacon, one of the co-creators of IoT for All. Now, before we jump into this episode, please don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or join our newsletter at iotforall.com/newsletter to catch all the newest episodes as soon as they come out. So, without further ado, please enjoy this episode of the IoT for All podcast. Welcome, Sanjeet, to the IoT for All podcast. How's the start of your 2020 going so far?
I would say, first of all, thank you so much for this opportunity. And it's 2020. I think we are extremely excited for the things that are going to come up quarter on quarter for Qualcomm and the smart cities, smart connected spaces.
That's fantastic. I think one of the best ways to start this would be to have you give a quick introduction of yourself to our audience, just kind of high level, talk a little bit more about your background, how you ended up at Qualcomm and what you're doing over there.
Absolutely. I am, for the guests who don't know me, my name is Sanjeet Pandit, and I'm the head of smart cities at Qualcomm here in San Diego. I run the smart city practice globally for Qualcomm through our regions and through the teams that are here in San Diego. I have been with Qualcomm for 20 plus years now, and I was responsible primarily in making sure that this practice becomes an integral part of the IoT overall practice that Qualcomm is in. Prior to this, I was responsible for the Asia Pacific sales for Qualcomm chipset semiconductor division. I was in the mobile BU. Then I moved over to the IoT BU, and I started this practice exactly about a year and 4 months ago in San Diego.
That's fantastic. So I guess to catch some of our listeners up, I know most people in the IoT space have heard of Qualcomm, but could you give a high-level overview of what Qualcomm does and the overall focus and kind of role it plays in the IoT space?
Absolutely. Qualcomm is one of the largest fabless semiconductor companies in the world. As you know, we enable semiconductor chipsets and technologies based that enable various handsets, and also we leverage that into the IoT space. Our semiconductors are enabling products, functionalities, devices, boxes that pretty much get deployed in the smart city arena and the smart connected spaces.
Okay. Are there any, I know some of this may be protected under NDA with your customers, but is there anything, any smart city projects that you guys are working on, or maybe just high level kind of talk that you may be able to share with our audience so they can kind of connect something real to it?
Yes. The biggest success we have had since we launched this practice is something called the Qualcomm Smart City Accelerator Program. Okay. This program, for lack of terms, is nothing but a Match.com of smart cities, where we bring in system integrators, solution providers, governments, cities, anybody who wants to get digitization done into a platform that pretty much matches who's looking for something. A result of that has resulted into multiple smart city practices and deployments around the world. So, to name a few would be Mexico City. We deployed with Jugano. We deployed in Rio de Janeiro. We have done a lot of projects within the United States for small connected areas like smart warehousing, smart parking. It's not only about cities, but we normally call it connected smart spaces. Any vertical, smart vertical is what we deploy. Internationally, in Indonesia, we have signed a MOU with the city of the Sumedang to kind of roll out the 100 smart city projects. And globally, we are doing a lot with many system integrators who kind of front end these projects with Qualcomm-enabled technologies.
Very cool. Okay, great. So I guess when you've had experience interacting with smart cities and governments, organizations associated with them, what types of projects have been the kind of at the top of their list when it comes to potentially being adopted or deployed within a city that wants to, now be smart, if you will?
When you buy a phone in a market, the first thing you look at a phone is you try and look at the camera, and you say, "Wow, this is a cool camera." So when you do a smart city project, the first thing that comes to mind to people is smart lighting and public city Wi-Fi. So cities have legacy systems in it. These legacy systems are difficult to kind of just throw away because that's public money. They have to make sure that everything is taken into account and the new ones are adopted. So cities are a little cautious. There are challenges in the cities. There are a lot of privacy acts. There's budget constraints. So when you come, and if you look at the top three things that people kind of gravitate towards, it's smart lighting, public city Wi-Fi, and I would say smart parking, because this kind of affects and kind of intersects the human life on a much tangible basis.
Okay. And then is there kind of a general sense of the type of ROI that governments are looking for or kind of using to measure success of smart city applications?
Well, I think there's a lot of rev share models that are going out there. Monetization is a challenge. Many cities don't really have a clear monetization plan. Public and private network, public-private partnerships are in place in such a way that you hand over the entire monetization right to somebody, and that particular system integrator runs the network, runs it as a service, and pays back revenue to the cities. Many cities have adopted that model as well. So yes, there is an ROI. I would not be able to kind of pinpoint that every city has it, as every city has a different measure. But at the end of the day, improving human efficiency, at the same time generating revenue that kind of sustains growth in various other verticals would be a good ROI to kind of highlight.
That makes sense. And on the other side of kind of all this, there's a lot of obviously challenges in cities in the process of getting a city to adopt a lot of these initiatives. What have become, I guess, in your opinion, or that you've seen in your discussions, been the biggest challenges in smart city adoption, or the biggest roadblocks, if you will, that are kind of causing some cities not to really take the chance on IoT related applications within their city?
I think the biggest concern or biggest hindrance, in my opinion, is budget. That's number one. That's number one. Number two, some of the cities try to do too many things at the same time. The best way to do many things is to do one thing at a time, in this kind of domain. So the best way to kind of approach this is not to kind of hash out and roll out a huge RFP that kind of requires multiple interactions and domains to kind of kick off. The best way to do it is to kind of do vertical by vertical, and slowly that kind of adds as a subset to a superset.
And how does the kind of existing infrastructure play into those potential challenges, and at the same time, the individuals that are making the decision and they're kind of, I guess, if they're risk adverse, or if, a lot of times when you work with any kind of municipality, there's always a hesitation just from maybe not being as forward thinking in technology and the importance of it. What kind of issues have you run into kind of in those areas?
I think as far as the infrastructure is concerned, as I said, there is a lot of legacy infrastructure in place. That infrastructure has to be accounted for. You cannot just throw that away because it's working, up and running, is fine. So they don't really want to, discard that or discount that. As far as forward looking, every city wants to do something better for the citizen. There is no question about that. The appetite is there. It is about the approach and how do you phase deploy it.
Okay. So one of the big things that's always been talked about for at least the last couple of years is the rollout of 5G. Obviously, depending on who you talk to, they'll tell you how, obviously there's a huge potential for it, but how ready are we now, and when will 5G really start to play an impact in the IoT space? And particularly relating to smart cities, how do you see the role of 5G coming in and playing a role in smart cities? Like, what will it enable? What will it really do to kind of change the dynamic in the industry, as opposed to kind of the connectivity available now?
First of all, 5G is here. We are ready. We have deployed, we have kind of enabled more than 50 handsets across multiple OEMs for 5G. Carriers are rolling out 5G. The biggest impact 5G will make is going to be on autonomous driving, connected cloud, cars to cloud, mission critical applications for life-saving emergencies, autonomous driving, AI. This is where high reliability, low latency applications play an important role. 5G is going to come in and dominate that. There will be some mission critical decisions that need to be made which right now the latency of 4G and the cloud computing may not be the best, but at this point, with edge computing and 5G speeds coming in, those things will have a paradigm shift.
Okay. And what kind of exposure have you had to other kinds of connectivity that are playing a role in smart city applications, like LPWAN, private networks? We had a guest on, I think last week from Nodal, and they're doing a crowdsourced network through Bluetooth application, and basically using individuals city resident smartphones to connect with smart devices and then upload data to the cloud. What have you kind of seen, or what are your view on other types of connectivity that are maybe playing an impactful role outside of just 5G?
I think right now there are multiple networks, like there's LoRa, there's mesh networks, NB-IoT, CAT-M. I think every application requires a different connectivity. It's like a bike lane for bikes, a truck lane for trucks, and depending upon the bandwidth and the applications, every connectivity at this point is independent and gives what it needs to give for that particular application. But with 5G coming on, it's like having a super highway where you can slice and dice that particular frequencies and also allocate something for mission critical activity, for 911, or maybe carve out something specifically on priority basis for some kind of crowd management applications. So yes, connectivity currently is ubiquitous in some way, shape, or form. With 5G, it's going to be all the more robust.
Yeah, and I think it's important for cities to understand the kind of breadth of options out there in connectivity, because, like you mentioned earlier, one of the biggest challenges in smart city adoption is budget. So, and a lot of cost associated with a smart city application and deployment is associated with the connectivity cost, the ongoing cost. And 5G, may be more expensive or more kind of maybe be overkill for some use cases, but while others, you might be something like a private LoRa network or Bluetooth may be a better fit and be more cost effective to potentially bring down the cost associated with a project to hopefully have more IoT deployments to then, increase the value of the IoT initiative within a city. So I think it's very important for an organization or cities themselves to really understand what is out there and what's available in addition to, 5G or just cellular connectivity.
That's our role. We go and educate cities on technologies. We never send an invoice to a city. We always go and enable them and explain to them what is coming in the roadmap, what's the best for what application. At the end of the day, what is the best practice they should adopt before they come out with an RFP that can be, leveraged to the max in terms of connectivity. So yes, you're right. Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and all that could be cheaper, but it comes at a cost. I mean, it's not going to deliver the same bandwidth that a 5G based enabled thing would be. And with technology over a period of time, cost does come down. You see a TV that cost $5,000 maybe 10 years ago, today is $50. So, right. So that you've got to give it time.
Oh, I completely agree. I mean, we're seeing that across the board in all areas of IoT, right? Hardware becoming more affordable, the modules associated are becoming more affordable. Just all the different components of an IoT solution, prices dropping, which naturally happens in any industry that's growing just based on market forces. So that's good. I think that's going to help lead to hopefully a lot more adoption for IoT solutions across the board, not just smart cities, but across all industries. So the more we can do to educate, the better we're going to be. I think one of the one of the challenges that a lot of people who maybe are not familiar with industry end up coming across is the fragmentation of the market and not really putting enough emphasis on the value and importance of partnerships in bringing any type of IoT solution to market. I don't think any one company can truly go out there and try to do all the different pieces from hardware to connectivity to the cloud, all the way down to the user interface. We haven't really seen anyone be super successful in trying to own every piece of that. So partnerships are super critical. And one of the things that you guys mentioned before the show was how IoT is a team sport. And I'd love if you could take a second to kind of elaborate on that viewpoint that you all have and talk a little bit more in depth about why that's so important for IoT success.
You hit it on the head. IoT is the same team sport. Absolutely. We completely believe in that. There's a lot to be done and nobody can do it alone. That is the beauty of IoT. Fragmentation is unification. That's exactly how we look at IoT. Fragmentation is unification. You are fragmented as a standalone piece, but when you come together, the kind of cohesion it creates is extremely important in IoT. We are the crux of every product. We enable everything. We are in the silicon that goes into boxes. At the end of the day, there has to be a glue between the ecosystem and the industry that flows across top to bottom. And that was the crux of finding or forming the Smart City Accelerator Program, which I told you, for lack of terms, is the Match.com of smart cities.
Yeah. Yeah, it's super interesting that you guys, really focus on that, because I think a lot of companies do overlook that piece, or they're sold by another company that this company can come in and do everything for them, because they don't, maybe that company's a little bit ignorant to what IoT really requires to be successful when it comes to a deployment. So aside from, I guess I don't want to say that obviously every point or every partner in an IoT solution is important, but in your mind, who do you think are the biggest key players in an IoT partnership to kind of lead to success? I mean, I know everyone has a role and everyone is important, but there's systems integrator, you could argue, are one of the most important pieces, because they help bring not just education, but also experience of being able to put the solution together, around the right costs and the right, technology to make this as efficient of a solution as possible. But in your mind, who do you think are maybe the one or two top key players in an IoT partnership that people really need to make sure they're focusing on and pick the right people to work with when they're kind of looking and exploring deploying something within either the organization, their city, for their own company, whatever you have you?
There are two aspects to this. And there are two answers, two kind of points to the answer.
Okay.
The biggest and the most important, in my opinion, is the consumer. If the consumer doesn't adopt to all the technologies that get deployed today, and those things are not enhancing or being efficient enough that the life of the consumer is changing because of deployments, these deployments mean nothing. You don't want to deploy technology for the sake of deploying technology. You want to deploy technology for solving a problem.
Okay.
So identification of the problem and working backwards with the help of the consumer so that the consumer adoption is important. That is the biggest part. And when it comes to the main crux over here is, I would say, silicon providers, because they put in all the smarts in the silicon, the box manufacturers and the ODMs, and the system integrators who put the solution system architecture together. These are the main three biggest important cogs of the wheel.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely agree. I think the first thing you mentioned is often overlooked. And I think something else to kind of just note is being able to truly assess the problem, the end user, and kind of work backwards from that piece and that kind of piece of information when you go down your IoT journey to find the right partners is super critical. And even if a company may not be able to do that themselves, bringing on somebody to help them do that, I think sets them up for long-term success and avoids a lot of these pitfalls that most companies actually will come across if they kind of rush that part of the process or don't really know their end user, don't really know their problem they're trying to solve, and don't really kind of understand the ROI they're trying to achieve. So I think there's a lot of definitely things that need to be understood and assessed before a company kind of goes down that IoT journey.
Absolutely. As I said, let me give you a very classic example. We are working, I don't want to name the customer, we are working with a very, very critical customer for smart cattle management, in which we need to understand the temperature of the cows that are grazing the lands, the location of the cows, the body temperatures for reproduction and for milk output. And right now, there's a very manual process where these farm boys, they go around with a manual temperature and do it manually.
Right.
And with the NB-IoT sensors, it saves so much time and effort that they were stunned that we could do it for them.
Right.
So these are the kind of problems we need to understand and really solve an issue. And that is priceless.
It is.
When you solve something like this and you save time, effort, and you enhance somebody's life and make it efficient, That is what IoT is all about.
Yeah. And I think it's important for people to understand that every player in an IoT solution has a role. And if we stay in those lanes, I think we have the best chance of succeeding. So for instance, in what you just talked about, the individuals who are kind of more on that, the side of the use case, interacting with the animals and kind of working on the farms, they know the use case, they know the problem they're trying to solve, they know who's going to be kind of interacting with it, and they have that information that's critical to those early steps of the solution. And then bringing in the correct partners who can help them now figure out the right connectivity, the right hardware, the right dashboard or kind of user interface that the end user is going to interact with. I think all of that is super critical. And if people really just play kind of in their lanes, kind of in that example you just said, I think it gives the best chance for success with the IoT deployment to actually solve a real problem and make an impact in people's lives, in their business. And I think that at the end of the day is the overall goal of IoT. And I think we're getting closer to being able to do that more efficiently and better across all different industries.
I agree with you. Wholeheartedly on this.
I wanted to ask you just kind of internally, just expand a little bit more on your Smart City Accelerator program and talk a little bit more about your all's partnership process and kind of what you do to find the right matches and to line up the right organizations. Because I think there's probably some takeaways from that philosophy and strategy that you guys have that could help other organizations out there looking to find the right pieces and right partners to help solve their problem and hopefully lead to a successful IoT solution. Absolutely.
The Smart City Accelerator program is a program that is open to companies that are playing in the IoT space. Mm-hmm. We don't restrict it to the fact that, only this kind of company or that kind of company. We are open to companies, right from people who have boots on the ground to antenna installers to anybody who is playing a part of the piece of the puzzle. This advantage of doing this as a silicon vendor is then we have a complete ecosystem around it. When an opportunity comes by, there are a lot of states, cities, Department of Homeland Security, other organizations that go on this website and look for by going to a search engine. Pretty much, it's like a search engine where you can go in and type smart parking, and anybody and anyone associated with smart parking shows up. So it's a search-based website. It's basically the company's website onto Qualcomm's website. That's all it is. Okay. And it kind of matchmakes and enables you in the area and the domain that you are in. If an RFP comes by and a requirement comes by, Qualcomm and my team reaches out to these companies proactively and creates a pseudo consortium to go after an opportunity. Okay. It gives you a global reach. You may not have an office in South Africa, but you may have a solution that will work great in South Africa. Right. And through this program, you will be able to reach out to the farthest of the opportunities, and Qualcomm will enable this facilitation and also making sure that the matchmaking is done in the right way.
And how are you sourcing and kind of vetting partners?
Yes, absolutely. So it is by invite only. You can go on the website and you can request for being a part of it. We go through the entire process of vetting the company, looking after the solution, making sure that is something in lines with what they have claimed. Mm-hmm. We talk to the companies prior, and then there's a proper onboarding process onto the program. So yes, it's a well-defined, well-established process that we have gone through.
Yeah, I think that's critical. I think just that vetting process is super important.
Yes, and it's not for inhibiting or blocking anybody. It is to make sure that your value is extended in the right way.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think, that there's a lot of, when it comes to any type of change in technology, kind of like we're seeing with IoT, a lot of organizations are very hesitant. And I think a big piece to get them over the hump of being hesitant is, aside from just seeing other successful IoT deployments, is trust. And I think the organizations that they choose to work with, they need to trust, not just in the knowledge, but the expertise, the experience they have, the people they're interacting with, in order for them to be willing to, put aside those fears they have about change and put money towards this and actually go down the path to build a solution. And I think, a lot of what you're doing in the early stages of your engagement with partners is playing into that trust aspect, because you're bringing those people to the table. And if people trust you, they're going to trust the people you bring. And it kind of just is this cycle that is, I think, crucial for the success of any of these types of solutions being built, especially when you're dealing with organizations who are very hesitant to do so.
Fully agree.
So I guess we talked a little bit earlier about some use cases and stuff, but I guess just high level, what have you, in your research and your exposure to smart city applications across the world, what are some of the more exciting developments or use cases and deployments that you're seeing? It doesn't have to be something directly related to Qualcomm, just something maybe you just kind of had, your eye on for a while, that you're kind of seeing deployed around the world somewhere.
Can you rephrase that? What do you mean exactly?
So aside from like smart lighting and smart parking garages, and Wi-Fi, like what are some other, maybe some unique use case, unique smart city applications that are taking shape that maybe some other people haven't really heard of or thought about that could be interesting here?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. We have a smart aquaculture where there's salmon farming and shrimp farming. We have something called smart winery where we monitor wines, grapes. We have drones go over, look at with AI machines, intelligence, look at the structure of the grapes, monitor the logistics, all that. Smart wineries for wines. Okay. We have smart mining. We have something for smart cattle management, smart poultry management. So there's multiple, right from agriculture to mining to obviously public city Wi-Fi. Most important is smart whiteboards. Okay. It's a huge push in the education space where we are, partnering with Windows on Snapdragon based smart whiteboards that are getting commercialized.
Interesting. So I wanted to ask a question. This came up from a conversation we were having at lunch today, and if you don't have any answer to it, do not worry, because I wasn't really planning on talking about this, but I thought it was interesting now that we're talking about these interesting use cases. But when it comes to big cities, let's say like San Francisco, and they have a very large homeless population, do you think there's any type of, or there will be in the future, any type of need for IoT to kind of help with that in some form or another? I don't know exactly what that would be, whether it's like monitoring where maybe homeless people are staying or spending their time, or anything along those lines. Have you heard of anything related to homeless populations related to IoT?
Not really. I haven't, but I think there is something called crowd management. Okay. Maybe they're extending that into that kind of applications. I don't know how that's going to morph, but I think crowd management versus there's a lot of security related crowd management monitoring that happens. I'm not sure if they're going to extend that into these kind of applications or not, but maybe that's what they're referring to.
Okay. Yeah. Someone, one of the comments I was brought up at lunch, this is not the most appetizing thing to talk about at lunch, but it was brought up nonetheless. And apparently like there's a big issue in cities like San Francisco with the homeless population going to the bathroom in public places. And and the government is so, is trying to solve this problem. So what they're doing is they're actually hiring, organizations to come up and clean up that kind of stuff. And then so of course I'm in a lunch full of IoT people and they're all brainstorming ways, how would you solve this problem? Like putting methane monitors somewhere, like what would you do? So it was just really interesting. And it got me thinking just about kind of really unique applications for IoT in problems you don't really think IoT may play a role in because we just don't hear about it too often.
Right. I mean, you'll be surprised on smart lighting. Yeah. People are putting right from sensors of all kinds of sensors to cameras. Not in the US, but internationally, we've seen it's like a hub. Everything goes in there, right? From CO2 monitoring to everything of that sort. So yes, I mean the IoT applications. The only one word that can define it is limitless.
Yeah, I forgot who was a guest earlier or middle last year maybe, and they were talking about smart lighting and how good of an application like street lamps are for like an IoT hub for different sensors. They're very high up. They have a lot of coverage area, a lot of visibility. And we talked for a while about how I guess important smart lighting in smart cities can be because of just how perfect they are for putting tons of different sensors and kind of using them as a hub for endless, or in your words, limitless IoT applications.
Yeah, I think it is. You'll be surprised. I mean, every year at CES, MWC, there are so many IoT companies in the IoT pavilion that come up with unique ideas. The key is how many of those ideas get implemented and how they get sustained. True. And what is adoption rate? Right. And that, again, comes down to the point. What problem are you trying to solve?
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree with you. This conversation so far has been fantastic. We haven't talked about smart cities really in a while here. I want to wrap up by asking you two quick questions. One of them is, what are you most excited about going into this new year in the smart city space? Is there, is it kind of is it still 5G? Is there something else that maybe we might not be too aware of if we don't work in the smart city space that we should be on the lookout for this coming year that will really kind of transform things in the industry?
I think the two biggest things that I'm kind of looking forward to is AI. There's going to be tremendous strides made into AI and how AI plays a role across multiple cross-sectional IoT domains. And number two is the advances that are going to happen in autonomous driving. And that too, also because of AI. Okay. And 5G as an underlying fabric to all this will obviously act as a catalyst.
Right. Yeah. Well, we've been talking about 5G for a couple of years now. And like you said, it's definitely here. It's just just going to continue to grow and play a more important part in all different applications. It's hard to go to any event without hearing about 5G and its critical involvement and place that it has in the IoT space. So definitely we'll be very excited to see that grow, plus AI, of course. And anytime you get into talking about autonomous vehicles, I think most people get kind of excited and interested, outside of the some who do get terrified by the idea of it.
Well, any new technology takes time for acceptance and trust. So yes, but this transition has been going over right from 2G to 3G to 4G, and now even faster in 5G. So
it'll be very.
We have to
absolutely. Yeah. So if anybody's listening out there that wants to kind of learn more about what you guys are doing or kind of stay up to date on what's going on over at Qualcomm, what's the best way to do that?
Well, you can reach out to the Qualcomm Advantage Network. And that would be the best. And you can look up just online, right on any search engine, Smart City Accelerator Program, and that would guide you to the right channels.
Well, I really appreciate your time. This has been a very good conversation. I think a lot of interesting stuff was discussed, a lot of valuable stuff was discussed. And we'll make sure we link up all these, all the information about Qualcomm Smart City Accelerator Program. Anything that we kind of talked about, make sure we can provide those links for our audience to be able to visit and learn more about. But other than that, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. And hopefully maybe we can have you back on sometime later this year to talk about the advances and kind of changes and developments in the smart city space and kind of what Qualcomm's doing.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure to be on the program and looking forward and wishing you the best with this.
Thank you so much. All right, everyone. Thanks again for joining us this week on the IoT for All podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, please leave us a rating or review and be sure to subscribe to our podcast on whichever platform you're listening to us on. Also, if you have a guest you'd like to see on the show, please drop us a note at ryan@iotforall.com and we'll do everything we can to get them as a featured guest. Other than that, thanks again for listening and we'll see you next time.